Joanne, as an album, had some of her best music and some of her worst music. Hello, you are tuned into Starstruck with Big Pink Energy. Who is me? Maybe you're here for a chat about pop culture, music news and gossip, or maybe you're here because secretly you are in love with me. I don't know. Let's see how long that lasts, because today I worry this episode might upset some of you. I have a controversial opinion, which I've mentioned before, but we've never really sat and dished and talked about it. So today we're going to do that. My controversial opinion is Joanne is her weakest album. Okay, before everyone goes to the dislike button or the comments or whatever to tell me off, let me just say, weakest doesn't mean bad. It just means in a set of things, some of them are better than others and some of them are not better than others. And Joanne, for me, is not better than The Fame Monster. It's not better than Born This Way, Chromatica, Art Pop. It doesn't beat any of them, really. Apologies if you think it does, but we all have different opinions and that's okay. But I do think there was clearly a disconnect that happened during the Joanne era between Gaga and the fans and also the general public, which is crazy because this same era is when we had the Super Bowl, we had A Star Is Born, we had 5'2", her documentary. There are so many big things that came out of the Joanne era. So for there to be a bit of a disconnect between Gaga as an artist and who she is with the audience just feels a bit strange to be happening at the same time as these like career landmark achievements, but that's how it was. So I've always kind of thought Joanne as an album had some of her best music and some of her worst music in the same album, for me personally at least. I think in terms of connecting with people, I think it's nearly there. It just needed repackaging a little bit and then it would have been maybe one of my favourite Gaga projects, but as it stands, Joanne just feels like it's a little bit unfocused. There's too many things going on, there's too many messages, there's too many sounds, there's too many different kind of bits. It doesn't feel as kind of considered as some of her other albums. Feels a little bit cluttered, actually, I would say. So if it was me, and it's easier to say this with like hindsight obviously, but if it was me, I would have cut this down and made it an EP, the Joanne EP, or a different title, which I'll get into soon. Cutting Joanne down to like 7 or 8 really strong songs would have been a lot better. And there's a couple of other changes I think she could have made as well. But as I say, it's easier to do that now looking back than in the moment. And I think something that we realise now is she wasn't making this album for herself or for us or for anybody other than her family, specifically her dad. So I think that affected the track list. I think that affected the kind of topics she was singing about. And I think it also affected the sound. And I think we're seeing a lot of these kind of country-inspired pop eras now. I think part of that is because of context that maybe I don't get as a British person, but I'm finding a lot of these American pop stars are turning to country music because they see it as like a more authentic route or a more kind of like true route of like what real music is. And I just don't think that like, I don't know if we have that same view on country music in the UK, that picking up a guitar and singing with a country sort of accent is what makes something more authentic. But I do get the sense that that is how maybe Americans might feel about music. So I think that's also why Joanne had the sound it did. We know originally she was working with Nile Rodgers from Chic, which would have had more of a kind of funk sound. I actually think originally LG5 would have sounded a little bit like Mayhem. There's a couple of songs on Mayhem that I think would have had that kind of funk 70s vibe that sounded like that's where she started with on Joanne before we got there. And I would still like to hear those songs, but it's fine. But yeah, so I think that's why Joanne sounded the way it did, which is a shame because I think Gaga has already proven that just because something is a pop song doesn't mean it's not layered or thoughtful or emotive. Like, there's so much rich storytelling in her pop songs. Look at Marry the Night, look at all the levels within that song, all the layers, all the messaging. There's so much in that one song alone. That was difficult for me as a fan at the time, to kind of be used to such like metaphorical work from Gaga and really layered storytelling, and then for all of it to just kind of be stripped back to very literal songs, what I felt were literal songs, without much metaphor, without many kind of, it didn't feel like we were in a dream, it felt like we were very much in reality, which is a shame, because before it felt like in all of the previous albums, and actually the albums that have come since Joanne, we're kind of in a space where you're not sure what is a dream and what's reality. You're kind of in a limbo between both, and it switches back and forth. But Joanne was very much like a solid, real, I'm in the real world right now album. And clearly Gaga felt like she had to make this album, especially, you know, consider what she was going through at the time. She's just broken off her engagement. She's just had a really big split with her manager, who's been with her since the beginning of her career, at the end of, or in the middle of, the art pop era. Her chronic pain is really, really bad at the time. You know, also, I think this was when this was early Trump days, am I right? So there was a lot happening in the world and in Gaga's life specifically. So it doesn't surprise me that she felt that maybe she needed to turn towards this more authentic sound for Joanne. It doesn't surprise me that she delved into her own family history and made an album about that. It's clearly what she felt like she needed to do at the time. It's just, for me, a shame that it just came out so unfocused and quite blended instead of being really clear what she was trying to say. I think at its heart, Joanne is actually a really feminist album. It's a lot about female relationships and connections that women have with other women, and that message gets lost a lot because we were kind of distracted by it being a country album. We were distracted by the fact she was calling herself Joanne when her name is Stephanie. Like, there were a couple of things that just, I think, threw people, especially coming out of art pop and how that sounded and looked, to then just go completely the other direction and give us Joanne, was just a bit of whiplash for everybody. So I think there's a lot of good things about Joanne, and the music is actually really good. I think a couple of the songs had really strong single potential. John Wayne, obviously, which was a single, Perfect Illusion, which was a single. I think also Dancing in Circles was a really fun song, and Diamond Heart, being one of the best songs on the album, absolutely could have been a single as well. I think there were some emotive songs with really lovely messages and lyrics, and those for me are Angel Down and Joanne, the title track also. I think both beautifully written songs. Angel Down is maybe my favourite of all of her piano songs she's ever done. I just think it's excellent and absolutely nails it at being really moving, and it really gets you to think and feel. It feels very raw, it feels very honest, so I really like that song. But on that same album, then you've got some songs that I think just feel too far out there, and that probably is Sinner's Prayer for me. I've always had a bit of a struggle connecting to that song and kind of trying to understand what she was trying to do at the time. Some just feel weak. Like, Gaga is a brilliant songwriter. She can make amazing songs. So to give us something like Million Reasons or AO, that feels like a step down from her usual standard, for me at least. I think she's better than that, basically. They're just average pop songs, and I don't think Gaga does average. I think she does excellent. So if I had to get rid of songs on Joanne, it would be those three. It would be Sinner's Prayer, AO and Million Reasons. I was really upset that Million Reasons was the single that kind of took off from the album because I just didn't think it was deserved. I think Angel Down was a better ballad, and then we just had other songs that were more interesting. Million Reasons for me is not an interesting song, and I don't really get what it's saying. It just felt very watery. It didn't feel very solid. So yeah, that's that's my general really quick overview of the music on LG5 Joanne. I also think with all the different messages that were on the album and all the different topics that she was singing about, there were a couple of things that just didn't really make sense. And for me, she's always done a really good job of having multiple meanings in her music, but for some reason on Joanne it just doesn't really work as well as the previous albums. So for example, Born This Way obviously is about self-love and acceptance and self-expression, but you also had songs about faith, you also had songs about finding your own community, you had, you know, songs about finding your group and sex and relationships, you had songs about immigration on Born This Way, and nothing for me felt out of place on that album. It all felt like it made sense all together. But Joanne feels like it jumps from songs around sex to her aunt who passed away and family relationships, towards female friendships, towards the meaning of life more generally. It just doesn't feel as coherent somehow. I feel like it could really be helped by, as I say, cutting some songs out and reordering the track list a little bit. So I actually did do that, and I don't think it would weaken the core message by cutting out the songs that I've chosen to cut. So, shall I give you my new track list? If Joanne were an EP, first of all, I'd call the EP Diamond Heart instead of Joanne. I think Diamond Heart is a really strong title, and I think it still conveys what she wants to do with this album. I think the EP itself would be generally about being a woman and Gaga's journey as a female in the industry, and still have that kind of tie back to, in all of the kind of mess of fame and celebrity, what really matters at heart, which are true, honest relationships with people. I think that's what the EP would be about. The opening track would be Diamond Heart. I feel like that song is just an incredible way to kickstart the album, and I know the actual Joanne starts with Diamond Heart as well, and I've always really, really liked that. I think it brings you exactly where you need to be and in the right frame of mind to hear the rest of the songs. It takes you to obviously the times where Gaga was a stripper in New York when she wasn't famous and she just needed to make money, and she made that money by having men watch her take her clothes off and dance. It's a really good song as well. So I think my EP would start with Diamond Heart because it just gives you context immediately of where you need to be. I would then go the second song on the EP with Dancing in Circles. I think it continues that theme of sexuality, but in a really interesting way, where we've come from Diamond Heart, where she's making it clear she's doing what she needs to do just to kind of get by and get to where she needs to be. Dancing in Circles is kind of looking at that view of sexuality, of being empowered to, you know, enjoy yourself without a man or without somebody else there, but it's still kind of playing on that, does she need someone or not? Following that, I would go with John Wayne. I think John Wayne is a really, really good song. It's fun. I like listening to it. I loved the music video as well, I have to say. John Wayne, again, is a really fun song about going towards something that's bad for you. She's spoken about this before. It's almost like the same or similar messaging as like Bad Romance in a way, going towards a bad guy. And I think, again, to follow from like Diamond Heart, Dancing in Circles to John Wayne makes sense as a story. And I'd follow that with Perfect Illusion. Perfect Illusion is obviously about the breakdown of her relationship with Taylor Kinney. Drama. I think after you've had that storyline about the 4 songs about her relationship, so you've had Diamond Heart about how Gaga's making money and using sex to make money, Dancing in Circles about her own sexuality, John Wayne about going for bad relationships, and then Perfect Illusion about kind of all of that crashing down. I think then it makes sense to turn inward and look at kind of self-empowerment as a woman. So the next song I put on this track list is Hey Girl, which I know is quite a controversial song. I see a lot of people saying it's like their least favourite. Not everybody likes Florence and the Machine. I personally don't love Florence and the Machine, but I really like the song Hey Girl. I feel like there's certain lyrics and things in there that maybe won't resonate with you if you're not a woman. There is nothing like female friendships, honestly. So Hey Girl is a special song, and I think it would have a nice place in this little EP, and I think it would follow on nicely from Perfect Illusion, because you've just had that breakup, and then, you know, who do you turn to when you've broken up with somebody? It's your friends. So I quite like that as a storyline as well. And then following that, I had Grigio Girls, obviously. Something else I forgot to mention when I was talking about all of the things Gaga was going through during Joanne. Obviously, she was losing her best friend. Her best friend was dying. So that was something else. So I think Grigio Girls is a nice song to have on the EP. I wasn't 100% on it though. I feel like I also had Come to Mama. And I feel like you maybe don't need both of those songs on this EP. I think maybe, what would make more sense? I think Come to Mama might make more sense than Grigio Girls. You could have both of them if you wanted like an 8-track EP, which obviously The Fame Monster was 8 tracks. So it's not too long, but I don't know, maybe you don't need both of those. Controversial. I don't know. I liked Come to Mama because it's both kind of Gaga looking for that connection and togetherness, but also saying that she's the one that's going to start it. And I like the parallels between years of her calling herself Mother Monster to then say Come to Mama is quite wholesome. I like that it's more of a outward perspective on life generally, not just about being a mother and being a literal or a metaphorical mother, let's say, but generally about just human connection and togetherness and what's the meaning of life and, you know, those kind of big questions. I quite like all of that in this song. I think that would have a place on the EP, and I would end the EP with Joanne actually as the final song. I think it's such a beautiful song. It's a personal story, and I think fans really would have appreciated Joanne the song more had it not been the title of the album, had it not been something she started calling herself. I think that confused a lot of people, which is sad because the song itself is really lovely. So yeah, I'd say that's my 7 or 8 track EP. I think what she then could have done was almost have like bonus songs or a deluxe or just like side tracks that she performed that were really just for the fans, and that would have included Angel Down. I've already said that's one of my favourites. I think after Art Pop, obviously the fans felt entitled to like double albums for some reason. And she obviously didn't do that with Art Pop, but she could have done something with Joanne. She obviously made a lot of music for that project, but I don't think all of it was necessarily needed on an album. I think it really could have benefited just by being a short EP. So all of those extra songs that got cut, she could have done something else with them. I think Angel Down could have even been like a song that was just for us to kind of know about, or something that she just performed live. I think she hasn't really done that since Princess Di, just have like a song that was just performed live that the fans knew about but wasn't really widely accessible to people. And I think Angel Down, as much as I love it and I love having it on streaming, I don't know, I think that would have been a nice one for that. Just Another Day as well feels like it would have suited that kind of bonus track format. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the Joanne songs. If I was promoting that EP, I would have had the first single actually be Diamond Heart, because as I say, I think it just introduces the world to Stephanie, and only the parts of Stephanie that Gaga wants us to see as well. It's not like, you know, it's not confusing, it's not hard to imagine, if that makes sense. It still makes sense to the fans, makes sense to the public. It just feels like a more honest way to kind of show another side of herself than calling herself Joanne, honestly. So I think that would have set the tone really nicely for the era as well as the EP. So as well as it being the first track, I would have had it as the first single. And then following on from that, I probably would have had either John Wayne or Perfect Illusion as the second single. I think the reason why Perfect Illusion was a single, I can imagine, is because the label probably thought it's her breakup song. And it's the first piece of music she's released since breaking off her engagement, so they probably thought it would be seen as quite juicy. And I think that still could have been the case, but I think a second single moment for Perfect Illusion rather than the lead single. And I also think she could have even done like a live album or something with the dive bar sessions. I remember, you know, she did a couple of those, so I think we could have had something else. We could have had like a bigger dive bar tour, or we could have had live album from that or something. That would have been really cool as well. But yeah, that's my analysis of Joanne and how I'd repackage it, because as I say, I think it really does have some of her best music. It just really got confusing with what was happening. There's too many songs on it there's too many different storylines happening that don't feel super connected. I think reordering, restructuring, and just being more kind of critical of what actually belongs on the track list and what doesn't, I think really, really could have helped Joanne as a project just feel stronger. I don't think she even had to rename it to Diamond Heart. If she wanted to just call it Joanne, that still makes sense. But I think Diamond Heart is a really pretty title that still feels kind of in line with the rest of her albums. You know, you'd have The Fame Monster, Born This Way, Art Pop, Diamond Heart. They all feel cohesive, but all different enough in their own way. And I think Diamond Heart as a EP title would have been really cool. But like I say, it is really easy to say these things in retrospect. I think at the time, Gaga was making the music she thought she had to make, doing the things she thought she wanted to do. And I think she thought it would give her a lot of answers making Joanne. And I think what happened was we all saw, you know, she was very broken. Coming into the Joanne era, she was facing a lot of different things. And I think she kind of hoped to just lose herself in the music and that it would save her. And I think maybe it did while she was making it. But we could see as she was promoting the album, she was still very deeply unhappy. And it looked like it was a really difficult time for her. And it was a difficult time for the fans because we were kind of being told, you know, this is the music she wants to make, this is what she wants to do. And then we were kind of like, yeah, okay, we'll go along with it. Loved some of it, didn't love some of it. And then she didn't even seem that happy herself. And then obviously the tour was again another tour she had to cut because her health was just so bad. It was a really difficult era for kind of everybody, to be honest, which, as I said before, is crazy because it also gave us some of the most biggest and important moments of her whole career. We had the Super Bowl, we had A Star Is Born, which I think everyone kind of agrees she wouldn't have been cast as the lead role in A Star Is Born if she hadn't released Joanne. So it's easy for us to kind of sit back years later and say these things and say, oh, she should have done this, she should have done that. But I really do believe, like, at the time she was doing absolutely wholeheartedly what she thought was the best thing to do. So all of that is to say, I'm not dragging Joanne as a project. I really, really like it. I think it's wonderful. As I say, the songs that are my favourite, I really love on this album. I think Angel Down is excellent. I think Dancing in Circles is one of her funnest sort of slutty songs, and you guys know I love those ones. John Wayne is really fun. Perfect Illusion is really fun. Even the title track, Joanne, is gorgeous. And Diamond Heart, I think, is just a really brilliant way to kind of introduce us to the other side of Gaga that we don't know as well, but also within the context of the Gaga that we do know. So yeah, I really liked this album. I think having it more focused generally around sort of how Gaga feels as a woman and navigating fame as a woman and then sort of returning back to what matters. All in all, I think each of Gaga's albums serve a different purpose and tell a different part of the story. And I think Joanne does tell a part of Gaga's story. It just isn't in the clearest way. So I have a lot of love for the album, but definitely would make a few tweaks if it were down to me at least. But I want to know, what do you guys think? If you were kind of given the task of cutting some of the songs out, do you think I've picked the right ones? Would you pick different ones? Are you secretly or maybe openly a really big fan of AO? Sometimes I get people that are very upset with me that I don't like that song, and I also don't like Sinner's Prayer. So always interesting to see what the different opinions are and stuff. But yeah, let's chat, let's discuss. I don't know what we have coming up. I think I've spoken about maybe doing a live episode soon. That could be fun. Let me know what you want me to talk about, I guess. There's fun things still to come this year with Gaga, so definitely keen to hear your thoughts and what you want from me. I've got sewing stuff I need to do as well. I need to start planning my outfits and things like that. So let me know if maybe aside from this podcast, maybe it's more like TikTok or YouTube content around sewing. Maybe that's what you want to see. I don't know. Tell me. Let's chat. Let's discuss. Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Best wishes and kisses. Bye.